It was just the path that I was to take, and when I returned to my faith, it wasn't something that Waylon understood. And I did not ever take leadership because he was spiritual and he believed,
Right.
but I don't know how much he understood until the very last.
Jessi Colter, a name etched into the history of country music as the First Lady of Outlaw Country, was never just the woman standing beside Waylon Jennings. She was an artist who wrote her own story with faith, love, and scars that would never fully heal. In Wanted, The Outlaws, the first country album to ever go platinum, she was the only female voice, yet she was never overshadowed. On the contrary, Jessi Colter emerged as an independent soul, gentle yet fierce, tender yet unyielding. But behind the spotlight and timeless hits like I'm Not Lisa and Storms Never Last lay a life steeped in tragedy. She sacrificed her own career to pull her husband out of addiction, lived in the shadows of a love that was both burning and tormenting, and carried secrets she only dared to reveal at the age of 80. Hers is a life that inspires admiration, even as it tightens the heart with sorrow. At 82, Jessi Colter still stands as an icon, not only of country music but also of loyalty and resilience. Yet what price did she have to pay to endure such a journey? And will the world ever truly know the full truth of the pain she carried? If your heart has ever been moved by Jessi Colter's voice, leave a comment saying, "Love Jessi Colter," to honor this extraordinary woman. And now, let us uncover the truths behind her tragic life. Jessi Colter, born Miriam Johnson on May 25, 1943, in Phoenix, Arizona, entered a world that was both stern and passionate from the very beginning. Her father was a mining engineer, disciplined and coldly pragmatic. Her mother, in contrast, was a Pentecostal preacher, a woman who had overcome tuberculosis through unwavering faith in God and believed her daughter was destined to lift her voice for humanity. From the age of 5, Miriam sat at the piano during the tent revivals her mother organized. Her tiny hands tapped out gospel melodies while her fragile voice rose among the faithful. Her mother never forced her, only stood silently in the background, allowing the gift to shine on its own. Music and faith quickly became two inseparable pillars of Miriam's life. Yet beneath the devout surface, the young girl revealed a wild and curious spirit. In her teenage years, Miriam felt the pull of stage lights, so different from the solemn air of church. At 15, she would sneak out at night to perform in Phoenix's local bars. It was a reckless choice, one that could have disappointed her family. But it was also the first turning point that proved her burning artistic hunger. Amid the clamor of music and the haze of cigarette smoke, Miriam discovered joy in connecting directly with an audience for the first time. She was no longer just the preacher's daughter or the little angel at church. She was a young artist searching for her own voice. On those small stages, she felt it deeply. Music was not only a hymn to God, but also a path to break free from narrow confines and touch the vast world beyond. From a little girl at the piano in an Arizona church, Miriam Johnson had begun a long, yearning journey, a journey that would lead her toward both the dazzling spotlight and the unfathomable shadows of country music. Music had long burned in Miriam Johnson's veins, but turning that passion into a real career meant navigating winding, treacherous paths. From her secret nights singing in Phoenix bars, her wild voice and presence soon caught the attention of a legendary figure, Duane Eddy, the rock guitar master whose twangy sound had captivated America in the late 1950s. At 16, Miriam became a backup singer for Duane Eddy. Before long, they fell in love. In 1962, she married him in Las Vegas, stepping into the professional music world under the name Miriam Eddy. That marriage opened a new chapter in her life. She moved to Los Angeles, the heart of the music industry, and began to test herself in two roles: performer and songwriter. In Los Angeles, Miriam gradually earned recognition as a gifted songwriter. She penned songs for major names like Don Gibson, Dottie West, and Nancy Sinatra. These works proved she was far more than just Dwayne Eddy's wife. She was an artist with her own pen, capable of reaching into listeners' hearts. Yet deep down, Miriam remained unsatisfied. She longed to stand at the center of the stage, to tell her own story instead of letting others sing it for her. With Eddy's support, Miriam released her first two singles in the early 1960s, but both Lonesome Road and its follow-up vanished without impact, failing to gain traction in the market. The disappointment forced her to put her singing dream on hold, devoting herself instead to touring alongside her husband. Her Los Angeles years became a mix of frustration and hard-earned lessons about the unforgiving side of the music industry. By the late 1960s, Miriam's marriage to Eddy was unraveling. In 1968, they officially divorced. Once again, she returned to Phoenix, carrying both unhealed wounds and unfulfilled ambitions. It seemed as though fate had cornered her. But in that silence, a fateful turn appeared when she met Waylon Jennings. At the time, Jennings himself was struggling to shape the emerging outlaw country movement. He immediately recognized Miriam's rare voice, at once pure and untamed. More than a companion, Waylon became the most pivotal launching pad of her career. Miriam chose a new stage name, Jessi Colter, inspired by Jess Colter, a notorious train robber of the Old West. The name carried rebellion and signaled her determination to define herself in a world that rarely welcomed women. In 1970, Jessi Colter released her debut album, A Country Star Is Born, co-produced by Waylon Jennings and Chet Atkins. Though not a commercial hit, the album was her passport onto the country music map. It opened a new era. From a young Arizona dreamer, Jessi Colter began to assert herself as a true artist, ready to face both the glory and the hardships ahead. After years of struggling to prove herself, Jessi Colter finally stepped into the spotlight. The turning point came in 1975 when she signed with Capitol Records and released the defining single, I'm Not Lisa. The song quickly touched millions, climbing to number 1 on the Billboard Country chart and reaching the top 4 on the Pop Hot 100. It was more than just a song. It was a confession. A woman living in the shadow of an old love, fighting to assert her own identity while being compared, dismissed, and forgotten. With a voice both fragile and proud, Jessi Colter turned I'm Not Lisa into an anthem of raw truth and the ache of love. Riding that wave, Colter released the album I'm Jessi Colter the same year. It soared to number 1 on the Cashbox Top Country Albums chart, number 4 on Billboard Country, and went gold thanks to its strong sales. Tracks like What's Happened to Blue Eyes and You Ain't Never Been Loved confirmed that she was no passing fad, but a fresh, commanding voice in country music. In 1976, Jessi Colter made history with the groundbreaking album Wanted, The Outlaws, alongside Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and Tom Paul Glaser. It became the first country album ever certified platinum, forever reshaping the industry. Among this band of musical outlaws, Colter was the lone woman, yet she was never drowned out. Her tender yet razor-sharp vocals provided the perfect counterpoint to the fire of Jennings and Nelson. Her duet, Suspicious Minds with Jennings, became a testament to a love as passionate as it was complicated. Half a song, half a confession. She didn't stop there. Colter went on to release career-defining albums, Jessi and Diamond in the Rough, 1976, Miriam, 1977, and That's the Way, A Cowboy Rocks and Rolls, 1978. She proved she wasn't dependent on her husband's name. She could stand entirely on her own. Her second peak arrived in 1981, when she and Waylon released Leather and Lace. The album went gold, powered by two major hits: Storms Never Last, written by Colter herself, a prophetic hymn about love enduring through turmoil, and the mashup, The Wild Side of Life / It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. Notably, Stevie Nicks had originally written Leather and Lace for Jessi and Waylon, but when rumors of divorce swirled, she kept it for herself and recorded it with Don Henley. Even in that lost chance, Colter's influence was undeniable. She was at the center of a web of legendary artists. Though her spotlight gradually dimmed, Jessi retained a special place in music. She earned multiple Grammy and CMA nominations for I'm Not Lisa, and was celebrated as one of the rare female voices bold enough to shatter Nashville's rigid mold. In a male-dominated industry, Jessi Colter paved the way for generations of women who followed, strong, independent, and unafraid to live true to their hearts. If Waylon Jennings's career is remembered as the face of outlaw country, Jessi Colter's stands as its soft yet unyielding soul. From I'm Not Lisa to Storms Never Last, she turned music into a diary, pain into song, and herself into a timeless icon. If Jessi Colter's career was a book of brilliant songs, then her private life was a diary written in tears. Her two marriages embodied two opposite kinds of pain. One, a love that bloomed too soon only to wither quickly. The other, a passion that both saved and destroyed her. In 1961, at just 18 years old, Miriam Johnson, the young Arizona girl with a gospel voice, stepped into what seemed like a dream marriage with Duane Eddy, the master of the twangy guitar who was famous across America. That union took her to Los Angeles, the heart of the music industry, where she became Miriam Eddy and carried the dream of shining beside her celebrated husband. To outsiders, it looked as if she had found a magic doorway into the world of stage lights. But within just a few years, all she truly found was loneliness inside her own home. With Duane's support, Miriam recorded her first singles like Lonesome Road. But instead of making a breakthrough, they sank quietly into a brutally competitive market. One song barely made it onto the airwaves, another never even escaped the studio walls. Each failure cut into the heart of a young woman desperate to prove herself. In the public's eyes, Miriam was not a singer, not a songwriter, only Duane Eddy's wife. As the long tours rolled on, Miriam spent countless nights backstage watching audiences cheer for her husband. She began to realize that the distance between them was not just the width of a stage. She had a voice, she had ambition, but both were swallowed by Duane's towering shadow. What once seemed like a foundation became a burden, and her artistic dreams shrank within the four walls of marriage. By 1968, after 7 years together, the marriage ended quietly. No scandal, no public drama, just two people whose hearts no longer beat in unison. Returning to Phoenix, Miriam carried all the scars of a 25-year-old woman: a broken marriage, an unfinished career, and a future clouded in uncertainty. Instead of the glittering lights of Los Angeles, what lay before her was emptiness and the sting of failure. Yet in that pain, a new strength began to form. The failure with Dwayne Eddy taught her a costly but vital lesson. No one else could hand her a career or happiness. If she wanted to be a true artist, she would have to walk on her own, no matter how jagged the road ahead. But it was in the very place where she seemed destined to start again from nothing that she met the man who would forever alter her life, Waylon Jennings. He was a rising star in country music, a rebel with a defiant gaze, a charisma that drew people in, and shadows that threatened to consume him. When he met Jessi, Jennings was at rock bottom, gaunt, addicted, intent on destroying himself. Yet in her, he found a light of salvation, and for her, he was both destiny and trial. Their love flared quickly, burning like a storm. In October 1969, they married. But this was no fairy tale. It was a whirlwind that swept Jessi into a world of endless tours, alcohol, drugs, and disappearances without a word. Jennings could be the gentlest man, handing her love songs born from drunken inspiration, and by the very next day, he might become a stranger. Bloodshot eyes lost in the haze of cocaine and whiskey. Jessi once wrote in her journal that there were nights she sat alone in bed, not knowing where her husband was, whether with another woman in some dim bar or lying unconscious in a hotel room. Outsiders saw a power couple, but inside she was battling the ghost of addiction every single day. And yet, out of love, she chose to stay. Not out of weakness, but because she believed that if she left, he would die. In her deepest fear, she carried the burden of wife, friend, nurse, and keeper of the soul of a man setting himself ablaze in the fires of passion and drugs. By the early 1980s, their marriage teetered on the edge of collapse. Fights, vanishings, and cruel words spoken when Jennings was no longer sober pushed them close to divorce. But instead of giving up, Jessi chose to fight. She sacrificed her career, stepping back from the stage, relinquishing chances at the peak of her fame, to devote herself to saving her husband. For years, she held his hand through seizures, soothed him in nights of panic, and prayed relentlessly until Jennings finally overcame his addiction in 1984. The world celebrated his resilience, but few knew that behind it all stood a Jessi Colter drained of youth and career, who had given everything to save the man she loved. In 1979, they welcomed their son, Waylon Albright Shooter Jennings. That child became Jessi's only reason to endure her darkest days. She raised him amid the chaos of touring, her husband's rebellions, and the weight of being both mother and emotional anchor for the family. Shooter would later become a renowned artist himself, always admitting that without his mother, he would never have survived the temptations of the music world. But that fragile happiness could not last forever. When Jennings died in 2002 at the age of 64, Jessi fell into a void that nothing could fill. The house once alive with music was now haunted by silence. She did not touch a piano for a year, because every note echoed the presence of the man who had been her entire world. The public called her the last woman standing of outlaw country. But they could not see that behind her calm smile, her heart was bleeding. Waylon Jennings' death in 2002 severed the last anchor Jessi Colter had clung to for more than 3 decades. The man for whom she had sacrificed her youth, her career, and her personal dreams was gone, taking with him a part of her soul. In those days, Jessi lived in silence. Fans saw the first lady of outlaw country, calm and composed in public, but in her Arizona home, she wandered through memories. Some nights she stayed awake until dawn, sitting by the window, watching the moon spill across the desert, whispering prayers, not for Waylon, for he was no longer there, but for herself, just to keep breathing. The woman who had once carried an entire family with strength now collapsed into loneliness. And at times, she doubted whether she could ever rise again. Her marriage with Waylon Jennings was a love song both beautiful and brutal, a place where devotion, sacrifice, and pain became one. Jessi Colter was not only a loyal wife, but also a living witness to the tragedy of a great love, dazzling like stage lights, yet leaving behind wounds she could never erase. And yet, true to the resilience shaped in her church-bound childhood, Jessi refused to let grief drown her. Once again, music became her lifeline. In 2006, she returned to the studio after more than 2 decades with the album Out of the Ashes. Its title said it all. She had risen from the ruins of marriage, of loss, of missed years. Her voice was no longer the crystalline tone of youth, but within every note lay a lifetime of experience, fractured, aching, yet deep and defiant. Critics praised it. Fans wept as they listened because they realized it was no longer just music, but a confession, the heartbeat of a woman who had lost everything, yet still walked forward. A decade later, Jessi once again stunned listeners with the Psalms, 2017. She set her favorite passages of scripture to melody, turning the album into a long prayer, a meeting of faith and music. For Jessi, it was never about fame. It was her way of healing, of preserving the light in her soul after years of darkness. That same year, she published her memoir, An Outlaw and a Lady, chronicling her tumultuous journey with Waylon, at once a half-finished love song and a final farewell. In its pages, readers found not only love but tragedy, the tragedy of a woman who spent her life in the shadow of a legendary man, yet was the one who kept his flame from burning out too soon. Jessi Colter's rebirth was not loud, not sensational, but profoundly moving. She did not return to reclaim stardom. She came back to prove that even after unbearable loss, one can still live, still create, and still love, even when the greatest love of one's life lies beneath the ground. Behind the glow of the spotlight and her timeless love songs, Jessi Colter's life carried secrets so heavy that she buried them for decades. Fragments scattered through her story, a wound in Houston, a small wooden box left in a Memphis motel, a half-burned letter in Tucson, a cassette-marked tombstone, and a lost recording called The Fifth Verse, all painted a shadowy picture where love, guilt, and obsession intertwined. In 1978, after a show in Houston, friends noticed bruises, not on Jessi's skin, but in her eyes and spirit. She denied it, insisting Waylon had never struck her, yet her journal revealed a haunting line. He looked through me as if he no longer knew me, as if I didn't exist. One night in 1981, at a cheap motel outside Memphis, the tension boiled over. Jessi fled in the middle of the night, driving aimlessly for hours just to escape her husband's rage and hallucinations. When she returned the next morning, Waylon was gone. All that remained was a shattered mirror and a small wooden box left on the table. She never opened it, never dared to, and for 30 years it sat locked away like a ghost in a drawer. When she finally found the courage to look inside, Jessi wrote that what she saw changed everything, but she never revealed what it was. Another secret tied itself to Tucson. In the early years of their marriage, Waylon forced Jessi to burn a letter warning her that if it survived, it would destroy them both. She obeyed, but the memory never left her. In 1992, while cleaning, Jessi discovered a cassette labeled Tombstone in Waylon's shaky handwriting. It wasn't music, just the sound of him weeping, mumbling confessions about a decision in 1974 that buried more than just a name. Alongside it was a photo of Waylon with a stranger in front of a church, faintly scrawled with the words, "E.W., don't forget what we did." Following the trail, Jessi uncovered a sealed court file from 1975 and an unmarked grave in an Arizona desert cemetery. From then on, she was haunted. When she received a photocopied picture in the mail, this time with her own figure faintly visible in the background, panic overtook her. She dragged decades of journals into her backyard and burned them all. The smoke rose like a ritual of release, though in truth it was just another burial. In music circles, whispers lingered about a lost recording, the fifth verse. They said Waylon recorded it one night in 1989 with nothing but guitar and voice. The lyrics spoke of the preacher's lie, the unmarked grave, and the woman who knew too much. The only sound engineer who ever heard it confessed it, left him shaken for weeks. In 2012, during a Q&A, a young fan asked Jessi directly, "Did Waylon ever write a song about Tucson?" She lowered her head and whispered, "He recorded many things he never wanted the world to hear." The climax came in 2022 during a tribute night in Nashville. No one expected Jessi to take the stage. She sat at the piano and began to sing Storms Never Last. But then, she changed the lyrics. "You promised the preacher we'd never go back, but I still hear the shovel, the earth going black." The entire hall fell silent. Her words cut like a blade through decades of silence. Afterward, she slipped out the back door without explanation. It is said, Jessi sent a sealed envelope to a well-known historian with instructions. "Open only after I'm gone." A leather suitcase was entrusted to one of Waylon's closest friends with the words, "Let it reach the right ears when I'm no longer here." Then, under her real name, Miriam Johnson, a raw acoustic album titled Floorboards suddenly appeared on a small platform. Track 7, Tucson, spoke of a church, a confession, and a truth buried before dawn. Days later, the album vanished without a trace. Shortly after, a church near Tucson underwent foundation repairs, digging up its basement, yet no official statement was ever released. In one of her final interviews, when asked if she had any regrets, Jessi replied simply, "Some ghosts cannot be buried by a song." At 82, Jessi Colter lives almost entirely apart from the bustling world that once carried her to the heights of fame. Gone are the lively nights of Nashville. Gone are the blinding stage lights. She has chosen to retreat into the Arizona desert. Her rustic ranch with wooden beams, Navajo rugs, and music relics coated in dust has become her sanctuary. She lives off-grid. No housekeepers, no bodyguards, no noise. She rarely appears at the Grand Ole Opry, the dream stage of countless artists, but for her, a silent wound that never healed. In early 2024, Jessi surprised everyone by granting a private interview. She said only one sentence, but it sent shockwaves through Nashville. "They don't know what I still have hidden?" That cryptic remark immediately sparked speculation about a secret property she maintains in northern Arizona. According to those close to her, it holds a lost vault, a personal archive of more than 30 unreleased songs, hotel room demos, unreleased duets with Waylon, along with journals, handwritten letters, cassettes, and even video reels from the 1970s. The greatest rumor centers around a song titled "The Water's Still Cold," recorded just weeks after Waylon's death, raw, mournful, and whispered to be her final farewell. Despite leaving behind a rich legacy, Jessi was never fully embraced by the Grand Ole Opry. She once said, "They loved Waylon, but they didn't know what to do with me." For her entire career, she was more often seen as Mrs. Jennings than as an independent artist. In 2022, when invited to return to the Opry stage for a tribute, she declined, answering with a single line in a letter: "The time for flowers has passed." A silent wound, never to close. Within her family, Jessi remains deeply connected to her son, Shooter Jennings. More than a mother, she quietly supports his tours financially, reviews his contracts, and even suggests lyrical tweaks. Rumors persist that one of Shooter's hits began with a poem Jessi wrote during her silent years after losing Waylon, though Shooter denies it, and Jessi only smiles. They once clashed briefly over the sale of streaming rights to the rare Waylon sessions, but maternal bonds proved unbreakable. She is also a discreet grandmother, avoiding cameras, slipping handwritten notes into lunchboxes, or sending books to her grandchildren with sticky notes marking her favorite passages. Her style remains pure outlaw, embroidered jackets, turquoise jewelry, and boots that have carried her across decades. Sometimes she's spotted driving the sleek black Cadillac Escalade gifted by Shooter, but her most treasured possession is a cherry red 1983 Mercedes-Benz SL, a car she bought with one of her very first royalty checks. For decades, she has driven it only once or twice a year, roaming the desert roads as if to hold a conversation with the past. Financially, she is not lavishly wealthy, but she is steady. Her net worth is estimated between $5 and $8 million, largely from retaining publishing rights to her key hits, receiving royalties from Waylon's posthumous catalog, and making shrewd deals. In 2019, the vinyl reissue of her debut album, I'm Jessi Colter, sold out in just a few hours. In 2021, she sold part of her catalog for around $2.5 million. But only the non-essential songs, keeping full control of the ones closest to her heart. She also owns land near Sedona and holds shares in a family-run Western fashion brand. Her current lifestyle is simple and self-sufficient. She employs only a part-time assistant, 3 days a week, mainly for errands and tech matters. Each morning, Jessi begins with a cup of black coffee and a few minutes of meditation, a habit she learned during the years of helping Waylon fight addiction. Then she writes in her journal, sometimes just a few lines, sometimes entire pages, as if preserving the heartbeat of her soul. Meals are light, plenty of vegetables, grilled meats. In the evenings, she occasionally pours herself a glass of red wine, lights candles, and sits quietly by the window. She listens to vinyl records, revisits old cowboy films on DVD. Her body has slowed, eyes weaker, joints aching, steps heavier. But her independent spirit remains unchanged. Her religious faith, passed down from her mother in childhood, has become her deepest anchor. Jessi keeps a private prayer room with a weathered Bible, letters from fans, and candles that burn without end. She often says, "God walks with me on the desert trail." Each afternoon, she can be seen walking slowly through the Arizona dust, a small figure seemingly in conversation with the unseen. And yet, after all, Jessi still keeps something in reserve. She continues recording voice memos whenever inspiration strikes. Drafts remain scattered across her desk. Some speculate it could be a final album, a spoken-word project, an unflinching memoir, or even a documentary she produces herself. But Jessi hasn't said, hasn't confirmed. She believes everything must come in its own time, and that moment, only she will decide. When people speak of Jessi Colter, they remember not only a voice soft as velvet and fierce as thunder, but also a woman who dared to break every boundary imposed on female artists in the conservative world of country music. Her sound was a rare blend. Tender gospel rooted in her church upbringing, the rebellious edge of outlaw, and above all, unflinching honesty, where every lyric felt like a page torn from her diary. I'm Not Lisa was more than a hit. It was a short prose piece about identity in shadow. A woman constantly compared, forced to live under someone else's presence, both in love and in show business. It touched the silent pain of millions of women, making Jessi one of the very few female voices in outlaw country, a realm long dominated by men. And Storms Never Last, a song she wrote for herself and for Waylon, long ago transcended music to become a life mantra. Storms will pass, and only love and faith will remain. What few know is that Jessi was also a quiet mentor. She often gave feedback on her son Shooter Jennings's lyrics, and in a letter to a young female singer overwhelmed by market pressures, Jessi wrote just one line: "Never apologize for writing the truth." In its simplicity, that advice reshaped the paths of more than a few artists. Today, younger generations are reclaiming Jessi's place in history. I'm Jessi Colter was reissued on vinyl and sold out instantly. Her lyrics spread across social media like messages carried from the past. Out of the Ashes has become a symbol of healing after loss. The Psalms, a reminder of unwavering faith, and her memoir, An Outlaw and a Lady, a raw record of truth, forgiveness, and vulnerability. Jessi Colter's legacy is also one of paradox. She was both a trailblazer and a victim of patriarchy, labeled more often as Waylon's wife than Jessi the artist. Yet it was precisely her chosen silence, her patience in waiting for the right moment to speak, and her refusal to play by the industry's rules that made her a rulemaker in her own right. Her legacy does not rest in loud declarations, but in the power of a voice that knew when to rise and when to fall silent, until the whole world had no choice but to listen. The life of Jessi Colter is not just the history of an artist. It is a mirror reflecting the strength of a woman's heart, to love without restraint, to sacrifice without regret, and to rise again from the deepest ashes. She never chose the easy road, nor did she seek the spotlight for herself. She chose love, she chose loyalty, and she paid the price with wounds that never fully healed. Now at 82, as Jessi lives quietly in the Arizona desert, her silence speaks louder than any song. It reminds us that behind the timeless melodies was a life that endured far more storms than we could imagine. And it reminds us, too, that authentic music, like Jessi's life itself, has the power to soothe pain, to outlast time, and to touch the hearts of those still capable of feeling. If you have ever seen yourself in the lyrics of Jessi Colter, leave a comment below. Not to retell her story, but to affirm that her storms carried meaning, because they comforted, accompanied, and lit the way for us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next emotional stories of Hollywood legends.